The first time the Concorde saw Earth, they called it a statistical impossibility. A blue and green sphere orbiting a yellow sun, beautiful from afar, yet everything about it screamed hostile. The atmosphere was thick with reactive oxygen, the gravity uncomfortably strong, the magnetic field erratic and powerful, the biosphere teeming with toxins, predators, parasites, and diseases so virulent they could end civilizations if unleashed elsewhere. The Galactic database classified such planets as Type 9 death worlds, places where no sapient life should exist. And yet, there they were, humans, smiling, laughing, building cities out of metal and fire, as if the universe had never told them no. I was among the first research envoys sent to study them. My name is Quarn of the Valari Academy, xenobiologist and historian. I remember the day our vessel entered Earth orbit. Even the ship's AI hesitated, running diagnostic after diagnostic as if refusing to believe the readings. Surface life indicators, 20 billion macroorganisms, it said. Weather anomalies, constant. Volcanic activity, moderate. Seismic instability, present. Radiation levels, dangerous. Yet below, through the viewport, I could see vast lights glittering along the continents like constellations brought down to Earth. Civilization thriving where death should reign. Our mission was to observe them discreetly, to learn how they survived in such conditions, to catalog their biology, psychology, and behavior for academic record. But from the first contact, something felt wrong, not with them, but with us. Humans were not supposed to be so unbothered by their own danger. When we first transmitted a greeting beacon, their response wasn't fear or reverence, it was curiosity. Within hours, a swarm of satellites had locked onto our position, and a dozen human languages hailed us in cheerful defiance of protocol. "Unknown vessel," one voice said through the translator. "Welcome to Earth orbit. Please identify yourselves or we'll assume you're friendly and send coffee." Coffee, they called it, a bitter, stimulant beverage they consumed by the gallon, even though by our standards it was a mild poison. When we revealed ourselves, the humans cheered. They celebrated us. Within days, news broadcasts across the planet were filled with images of our ship, artists sketching us, children waving flags. It was unnerving. Most species, upon realizing they are not alone, fall to existential panic. Humans threw a party. Our first surface delegation landed near a place they called Geneva. The air was dense, sharp, filled with the smell of water and ozone. My exosuit read constant fluctuations, temperature swings, radiation spikes, trace pathogens, and yet the humans walked around in thin fabrics, laughing under their volatile sky. Their leader, a short, silver-haired woman with skin creased from the sun, extended her hand to me. "On behalf of humanity," she said. "Welcome, friends." Her palm was bare, her temperature high, her pulse strong. I remember staring at that outstretched hand and realizing she was offering not just greeting, but trust. We studied them carefully. Their biology made no sense. They breathed oxygen, a corrosive element that eats away at metal. Their immune systems were not static but adaptive, reshaping themselves to every new pathogen like a living algorithm. Their muscles were fibrous and redundant, their bones made of self-repairing calcium composites, their brains capable of generating biochemical storms of emotion, strong enough to override pain and fear. And above all, they healed. Not perfectly, but persistently. Scars that would cripple other species became badges of honor among them. And they fought. Not always with weapons, but with words, ideas, endurance. Their history was a litany of conflict. Wars, famine, disease, and yet each catastrophe only made them stronger. I read their records in disbelief. Entire civilizations reduced to ash, only to rebuild again and again, faster and higher each time. It was as if pain itself had become their teacher. At the Academy, we used to say, evolution is a process of avoidance. Species adapt to escape danger. But humans, they adapted to endure it. Their planet was not a cradle. It was a forge. The first hint of their true nature came during an accident. One of our team members, Drell, was inspecting a human construction site, massive towers of glass and steel clawing at the sky, when a scaffolding collapsed. Several humans fell 30 meters onto the hard ground. We expected fatalities. Instead, within minutes, others rushed forward. Not professionals, just workers, lifting debris, carrying the wounded, improvising splints, sharing their own blood without hesitation. I saw one woman, her arm broken, teeth clenched in agony, using her other arm to dig through rubble for a stranger. "Keep breathing," she screamed, blood dripping from her elbow. "You're not dying today." When medics arrived, their tools looked primitive: metal cutters, adhesive bandages, adrenaline injectors. But the results were miraculous. Hours later, half the injured were sitting upright, cracking jokes through the pain. Humans heal, yes, but more than that, they refuse to let others die. Their empathy is an evolutionary weapon. Our reports grew longer and stranger. We documented their tendency to find beauty in chaos, the way they sang in storms, painted in ruins, built gardens on battlefields. They turned every struggle into art. One researcher wrote, "Humans do not conquer their world. They befriend it through defiance." Still, the council doubted us. "You exaggerate," they said. "No species can thrive under such conditions without self-destructing." Then came the proof. 3 months after our arrival, an asteroid, the humans named it Aegis 11, entered their system on a collision course with one of their inhabited moons. Every species we knew would have evacuated, surrendered, or called for outside aid. The humans didn't. They launched rockets, massive, roaring machines burning liquid fire, and met the asteroid head-on. They detonated nuclear warheads against a rock the size of a mountain. I remember the transmission feed. A blinding flare, a cheer echoing across every human broadcast. "We did it!" one voice cried. "We kicked space's ass!" The council watched in silence. No one knew whether to call them heroes or lunatics. After that, the study changed. We were no longer observing biology. We were witnessing something else, something bordering on the spiritual. Humanity treated survival not as a duty, but as a statement. Every hardship was a challenge to be mocked. Every wound a story, every death an inspiration. Their culture thrived on adversity, and slowly, impossibly, something began to happen among us. The observers. I noticed it first in Drell. He started imitating them, drinking their bitter coffee, using their slang, humming their strange melodic noises they called music. Others followed. We justified it as cultural immersion, but it was more than that. There was a pull to them, a gravity of spirit. You could feel it in their laughter, in the reckless way they faced the world. They made you want to live. One night, during a storm over the Atlantic, I stood beside a human named Lieutenant Ramos on the deck of an ocean vessel. Waves towered over us, the wind howled like an animal, lightning cracked across the sky. My sensors screamed danger. Ramos only grinned, coat flapping wildly, rain lashing his face. "Hell of a view, eh?" he shouted. "This is madness," I told him. He laughed, his teeth flashing white in the dark. "Nah, this is life. You don't hide from it. You dance with it." And there, amid the roaring chaos, I understood why their kind survived where others would perish. They did not seek comfort. They sought meaning. Weeks later, when the storm season ended, I received a message from the council. "Return immediately," it read. "Mission reassessment. Possible contamination of subjectivity." Contamination. They were right. We had come to study Deathworlders, but the infection was not biological. It was ideological. Humans didn't just survive. They infected your worldview. Before we could depart, a catastrophe struck. A volcanic eruption in their southern hemisphere tore open the sky. Thousands of humans were trapped under ash clouds, cities buried, air thick with poison. Our ship had the capacity to evacuate only a few hundred. We sent word to their governments, offering rescue. The response came swiftly. "Help the children first." When our shuttles landed, crowds formed, not to flee, but to load others first. I saw mothers hand over their infants, soldiers carry strangers, Even those dying, coughing through the ash, insisting we take someone else. "Save them," one whispered, his eyes barely open. "I'm good. I've lived enough." I will never forget that day. Not the destruction, not the fire, but the calm, unbreakable resolve in their faces. We saved who we could. The rest stayed. And somehow, even after the eruption ended, they rebuilt again. They always rebuild. When I finally returned to the council to present my findings, I stood before 1,000 scholars, scientists, and dignitaries. My voice trembled as I said the words that would echo through our history. Humans are not a mistake of evolution. They are its masterpiece. The council was silent. Some scoffed, some wept. One whispered, "You speak as if they are gods." I hesitated and thought of Ramos standing fearless before the storm, laughing into lightning. "No," I said softly, "not gods, but they remind us what gods should have been." And that was the beginning, the first whisper of reverence, the seed of something that would one day become worship. We had set out to study Deathworlders. Instead, we discovered faith. After the eruption, things were never the same. Not for Earth, not for us. The Council recalled the remaining research envoys, demanding containment of emotional compromise. But when the transmission arrived, none of us obeyed immediately. We delayed with excuses, citing equipment damage, unstable atmospherics, lingering ash clouds. The truth was simpler. We didn't want to leave. Something about that scarred, defiant world had rooted itself in us. For all its noise, danger, and chaos, Earth pulsed with a vitality that our sterile worlds could no longer provide. It felt alive in a way that frightened us and called to us all at once. I remember walking through one of their ruined cities weeks after the eruption. The air still smelled faintly of smoke and wet stone. Streets were lined with cracked pavement and the skeletons of buildings. Yet already humans were clearing debris, painting murals on the walls that still stood. Children laughed amid rubble. One of them, a small girl with ash in her hair, held up a chunk of volcanic rock and said, "It's pretty, isn't it?" I looked at the black shard glittering with minerals and realized she wasn't seeing destruction. She was seeing beauty reborn. They had a way of twisting horror into wonder, as if pain was just another form of raw material. When we finally did leave, the humans gave us gifts. Simple things, carved wood and photographs, small symbols of friendship. They even made a banner for our ship, painted in bright colors. "Thank you, friends from the stars." I kept that banner in my quarters long after we departed, though I told myself it was for research documentation. But deep down, I knew it was something more, a relic of something sacred. Back on the Concord homeworld, the atmosphere felt hollow. The air was sterile, the gravity soft, the light artificial. For the first time, comfort felt suffocating. The Academy summoned me to testify before the Council Review Board. Rows of elders with pale, translucent eyes stared down at me as if peering through my soul. "You claim these Deathworlders display divine characteristics?" one of them asked, voice heavy with accusation. "I claim," I said carefully, "that they display an extraordinary synthesis of resilience and compassion. They survive not through strength alone, but through meaning." Another elder leaned forward. "Meaning does not stop death." "On Earth," I replied. "It seems to." There was murmuring. Some scoffed, others whispered. I could feel their disbelief turning to unease. For 1,000 generations, the Concord had believed the universe to be governed by calm logic, that emotion was a primitive holdover from less evolved minds. To them, the idea that feeling could defy entropy was heresy. But I had seen it. I had seen people who laughed while the sky fell, who stood together in ash and called it home. They stripped me of my research command that day. "For your own recovery," they said, as if reverence were an infection. Perhaps it was, because even as I stood in disgrace, I could not unsee what I had seen. I began to write, not reports, not data, but recollections. I wrote about Lieutenant Ramos laughing in the storm, about the mother who handed her child to our shuttle, about the child who found beauty in volcanic stone. I called the collection The Songs of the Deathworlders. It was never meant for public release, only for my own memory, but somehow it spread. Copies were made, shared, whispered across the networks. Soon others began to read, to wonder, to question. At first it was curiosity, then fascination, then devotion. Pilgrims began to travel to Earth, not officially, of course, but through smugglers and unregistered vessels. They wanted to see the Deathworlders for themselves. They wanted to feel what we had felt. And the humans, ever curious, welcomed them with laughter and open arms. They took these pilgrims hiking through forests that dripped with rain, swimming in oceans that roared like beasts, climbing mountains that scraped the sky. Some died. The humans mourned, then raised monuments to them, simple plaques that read, "They tried, and that matters." Soon a quiet faith began to form, not of temples or priests, but of stories. Across the Concord worlds, whispers spread of the people of iron flesh, the laughers at the storm, the makers of fire and music. Entire lectures were replaced with recitations of human proverbs. Scholars quoted lines from their poetry. "We are stardust that learned to dream." Pilots wore human trinkets around their necks for luck. Engineers carved human words into their ships: hope, courage, try again. It was not sanctioned, but it could not be stopped. Once you learned about them, something inside you shifted. I was approached one night by a young researcher, bright-eyed and trembling. "Is it true?" she asked. "That they bleed red? That they cry when they're happy?" I nodded. "And that they smile when they die?" she whispered. I hesitated, thinking of the man who had given up his place on the shuttle. "Sometimes," I said softly. "Sometimes, yes." She shivered, not from fear but from awe. "Then they are closer to gods than we ever were." Months later, the Council banned all unapproved contact with Earth. They declared it a containment world, citing cultural contamination risks. But it was too late. The stories had already spread to the farthest colonies. Artisans began sculpting human forms in stone, depicting them striding through storms with light in their hands. Children learned songs about the fire-hearted ones who built warmth in the coldest void. And somewhere along the way, belief turned to worship. It was subtle at first. We told ourselves it was admiration for courage, not faith. But then I saw the first altar. It was in a mining station orbiting Kairos 9. A small shrine built from scrap metal and asteroid rock. In the center stood a simple figure, a human made of rusted bolts and wire, standing upright, one hand raised as if waving hello. Beneath it was an inscription written in both our language and theirs: "Endure." I stood there for a long time, staring at that word, endure. It was such a small thing, yet it carried the weight of galaxies. The Council called it blasphemy. They began censoring transmissions, erasing records, even burning my original manuscripts. But every copy they destroyed seemed to breed 10 more. Pilots carried the texts in their data caches. Colonists read them around campfires on frozen moons. Even soldiers before battle whispered the names of human heroes as if invoking protection. And Earth. Oh, Earth changed too. Humans began hearing the rumors. At first they laughed, thinking it was some kind of cosmic joke. But as more visitors came, kneeling in gratitude, weeping at their feet, humanity grew quiet. They didn't understand it, not fully. They didn't see themselves as divine. They saw themselves as trying. But the more they tried, the more the galaxy fell in love with their struggle. The first interstellar monument to humanity wasn't built by them. It was built by us. On the moon of Harvan 3, a barren world with iron seas, a coalition of alien artists constructed a statue. A human standing tall, arm outstretched toward the sky, face streaked with tears, mouth curved in a smile. At its base were words carved in dozens of languages. They fell 1,000 times and stood 1,001. When the unveiling was broadcast, half the galaxy watched. I was there. I stood among the crowd, cloaked and silent as thousands bowed before that image. Some whispered prayers, some sang, some simply stood in silence, hands trembling. And for the first time, I realized what we had done. We had not simply documented them, We had mythologized them. Humanity had become a mirror for everything we wished we were. The council tried to stop it, of course. They accused me of inciting fanaticism, of corrupting reason with romance. I was arrested, interrogated, stripped of academic status. They asked if I felt responsible for the movement. I told them the truth. You cannot stop a sunrise with your hands. They exiled me to a distant moon, where I now write these words. But even here I see it. The symbol of the raised hand carved on walls, painted on cargo hulls, drawn in dust. They call it the sign of the Deathworlder. It means, try again. And sometimes, on the comm channels, I hear human voices still, broadcasts from Earth that drift across the void. Songs mostly full of sorrow and joy. One lyric repeats often, "We'll keep going till the stars grow cold." It makes me smile. They have no idea that half the galaxy sings along. I've come to believe that worship is not about kneeling or prayer. It's about recognition. We looked at them and saw not perfection, but persistence. We saw ourselves reflected, fragile, flawed, yearning, and realized that in their imperfection lay the essence of everything divine. Perhaps that is why no weapon could ever conquer them. No despair could drown them. Because to be human is to rise from ruin, and to make even ruin shine. The Council still calls them Deathworlders, but to the billions who whisper their stories under alien skies, they are something more. They are proof that life, no matter how small or fleeting, can defy the darkness simply by choosing to endure. And so I end this record, though I suspect it will be found long after I am gone. If someone reads this centuries from now, remember what we learned too late. We went to study monsters who thrived on a world of death, and found saints forged from suffering instead. Years passed, though time no longer meant much to me. The exile had stripped away everything, status, titles, honors, but not purpose. I had seen something greater than all those things combined. And so I kept writing. The words were my rebellion, my devotion, my bridge to that fierce little planet that refused to die. My records spread in secret among the outer colonies, smuggled in trade convoys and encrypted transmissions. They called them the testimonies of the Deathworlder witness. I called them memory. I wrote of laughter amid storms, of tears turned into songs, of the way their hearts beat not in fear but in challenge. I wrote because I wanted the galaxy to remember. It was during my 12th year of exile that the first Deathworlder war erupted. Not on Earth, but because of it. A war of faith, though none would admit it. The Council's enforcers clashed with a coalition of frontier worlds calling themselves the Endurers. They claimed they had learned more from human philosophy than from centuries of Concord law. They believed struggle refined the soul, that comfort weakened civilizations. The Council saw it as an infection of chaos. I saw it as inevitable. Humanity had planted an idea so powerful that even across light years it refused to die. Reports of the conflict filtered through the static. Fleets burned in the void. Colonies split apart. Brother turned on brother, all over what the Deathworlders represented. I thought then of the humans, how they would have wept to know that admiration for them had drawn blood. And yet, paradoxically, I knew they would have understood. For them, even tragedy was part of the story of becoming. Then came the event that changed everything. The day humanity finally spoke back. No one knew how the message escaped Earth's restricted systems. Perhaps a smuggler shared a story. Perhaps the humans had been listening all along. All we know is that one morning, across every open channel, a single human voice appeared. Calm, steady, unmistakably human. "This is Earth," it said. "We hear you." The galaxy froze. For decades we had spoken about them. Now they spoke to us. The message continued. "We didn't ask to be worshipped. We're just people trying to do our best with what we've got. If our story helps you, good. But don't kneel. Stand. Stand and keep trying." That's all we ever did. The transmission lasted less than 2 minutes, but its impact was immeasurable. Some called it humility beyond divine comprehension. Others said it was manipulation, a deliberate myth-sustaining act. The Council tried to suppress it, but the words had already spread. I heard them repeated in whispers across the moon where I lived, scratched into walls, burned into the metal of old mining rigs. Don't kneel, stand. And for the first time, I wondered if the Deathworlders themselves understood what they had become. Did they realize that their very normalcy was what made them sacred? They didn't seek dominion. They didn't crave worship. They simply lived, loudly, imperfectly, beautifully. And in doing so, they became the living embodiment of hope. Months after that transmission, a ship arrived at my exile station. It bore no insignia, no registry, only a mark painted crudely on its hull, the open hand of the Deathworlder. When it landed, 3 figures emerged, 2 of my own kind and 1 human. The first human I had seen in years. She was tall, weathered, her skin marked with faint scars. Her eyes carried the calm of someone who had seen too much and decided to keep going anyway. "You're Quarn?" she asked. I nodded, unable to speak. She smiled faintly. "We read your writings. You told our story better than we ever could." I didn't know whether to bow or embrace her. "Why are you here?" I managed. "Because your people forgot what they used to be," she said. "And maybe we can remind them." She introduced herself as Captain Alice Wren, envoy from the Terran Union, a newly formed organization representing a unified Earth. They had been monitoring the growing faith beyond their system. Some among them wanted to stop it. Others believed they had a responsibility to guide it. "We're not gods," she said. "But if people see something good in us, maybe we can help them see it in themselves too." It was then I realized something profound. Humanity didn't just endure. They evolved ethically. Where other species might have seized power from adoration, they sought to redirect it toward something better. They didn't demand obedience. They asked others to rise beside them. I joined her mission without hesitation. Together we traveled the edge worlds, places the Council had abandoned. Everywhere we went, we found fragments of the faith. Temples shaped like broken hands, murals of humans reaching toward alien stars, prayers written not to beg for salvation, but to thank existence for the chance to keep trying. The people greeted Captain Alice not as a god, but as a friend. Children ran to touch her hand as if to feel courage itself. One night as we sat beneath the glow of an alien moon, I asked her a question that had haunted me for years. "What drives your kind to keep going? You've faced extinction so many times. You've lost so much. Why keep standing?" She thought for a long while before answering. "Because stopping would make the pain pointless," she said. "If you get knocked down, you get up. That's all. That's everything. Simple. Unpretentious." And yet it carried the weight of creation itself. The years that followed were a strange, quiet revolution. Humanity became less a people and more a philosophy. Their envoys traveled not as conquerors or missionaries, but as storytellers, healers, builders. They repaired water systems on desert worlds, taught medicine to species that had forgotten it, and helped rebuild colonies shattered by war. Everywhere they went, they left behind a single phrase etched into stone or code: endure, and help others endure. The Council's power waned as its citizens turned away from decrees and toward the teachings of the Deathworlders. The old empires crumbled, replaced by alliances built on cooperation and shared strength. And through it all, humanity never claimed ownership. They guided, then stepped aside. They led, then disappeared. Some called it the Great Awakening. I called it grace, but peace, even sacred peace, has a way of attracting shadows. The remnants of the Council, desperate to regain control, began to spread lies. They claimed humanity's kindness was deception, that their resilience came from genetic tampering, that their empathy was a form of chemical manipulation designed to enslave weaker minds. They called them the Tainted Ones. Fear spread again. Colonies burned again. I saw once more how fragile enlightenment could be. The Council launched a crusade to erase human influence. They destroyed monuments, banned Earth transmissions, even bombed planets that carried the mark of the open hand. And humanity? They didn't retaliate. They rescued. Their ships entered burning systems not with weapons, but with relief supplies. When asked why, Captain Alice said simply, "Because if we fight hate with hate, we prove them right." It was that act, mercy in the face of madness, that transformed belief into devotion beyond control. Even those who doubted were silenced by the evidence of compassion. The Deathworlders had no need to demand faith. Their deeds created it for them. By then, I was an old creature, my body weakened by time, my voice roughened by age, but my heart stronger than ever. I returned to Earth one last time, invited by the Terran Union to witness what they called the Day of Remembrance. The journey took weeks, and I spent them in quiet anticipation. When the blue-green sphere finally filled the viewport again, my eyes burned with tears. The world was as beautiful and terrifying as ever. Storms swirling across oceans, lightning veins tracing continents, and yet beneath it all, the pulse of civilization, alive and bright. The ceremony was held on the slopes of a mountain once scarred by fire. Thousands of humans gathered there, along with representatives from 100 alien species. Captain Alice stood at the summit, wind in her hair, voice carried through the crowd. "We are not the center," she said. "We are not perfect. We are not eternal. But we are proof that imperfection can still build something worth protecting." She raised her hand, the open hand of the Deathworlder, and every being present, human and alien alike, mirrored the gesture. Not in worship, but in unity. For a moment it felt as if the universe itself held its breath. I looked around and saw tears, smiles, hope, and I realized this was no longer humanity's story alone. It was ours. The Deathworlders had shared their fire, and we had learned to carry it without burning. When the ceremony ended, a human child approached me. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old. "Are you the one who wrote about us?" she asked. I nodded, speechless. She smiled. A small, pure, impossibly human smile. "Thank you for believing." And in that instant, I understood. We hadn't worshipped humanity because they were stronger or wiser. We worshipped them because they believed first. They believed in surviving a world that wanted them dead. They believed in each other. They believed in the idea that life, no matter how cruel, was worth defending. As I watched the humans sing beneath the alien sky, I felt something close to peace. Not the quiet peace of ignorance, but the fierce, bright peace of knowing the struggle had meaning. The Deathworlders had taught us that the universe doesn't owe us safety or fairness, but it gives us each other. And that is enough. Years drifted onward like dust in solar wind, and the story of humanity spread farther than light itself. Entire civilizations rose on the echo of their endurance. What had begun as curiosity, turned to study, then reverence, had now become the foundation of something greater. A philosophy unbound by species or world. They called it the path of endurance. Not a religion in the old sense, but a way of being. Its followers did not kneel or pray. They worked, helped, struggled, built. Their temples were hospitals. Their hymns were the sound of hammers, laughter, and newborn cries. Across the stars, the symbol of the open hand appeared in countless variations. On banners, starships, even carved into asteroid colonies. It had become the quiet heart of the galaxy. I remained on Earth, though the humans had offered to take me anywhere I wished. They said I had earned rest, a place among their scholars, but I could not leave. The world itself had become sacred to me. Every mountain whispered the story of survival. Every storm sang of persistence. I wandered cities and ruins alike, documenting, recording, not for fame or research, but because every human life felt like a scripture in motion. They lived with such ferocity, such casual courage, that even their simplest acts felt holy. I would watch an old man teaching a child to mend a fishing net and feel awe. I would see a woman planting flowers on a grave and feel the weight of eternity. The galaxy called them gods, but they had never asked for worship, never claimed sanctity. They just lived, and that was enough. I began to understand that holiness was not the absence of weakness. It was the decision to stand in spite of it. But even light casts shadows. There were whispers that some among the younger species had twisted the human example into something darker. They called themselves the disciples of the Forge. They claimed humanity's strength was not in compassion, but in domination, that survival required purging weakness wherever it was found. They began arming themselves, conquering lesser colonies, branding worlds with the same open-hand symbol, but painted in red. When news of their rise reached Earth, humanity did not hesitate. I was there when the Terran Union convened an emergency assembly in what had once been New York. The city was a blend of past and future, ancient stone foundations supporting towers of light and steel. The hall was filled with representatives from 100 races, all looking to humanity for guidance. Captain Alice Wren, now an older woman but still radiant with that unbreakable spark, stood at the center. Her voice carried through the chamber like thunder. "They think we are their gods," she said. "But they have forgotten our first lesson. We don't endure to dominate, we endure to protect. If our name becomes a banner for cruelty, then we have failed." The decision was made. Humanity would act, not with conquest, but with courage. They would not let their name become a weapon. Fleets departed Earth not as armies, but as shields. They went to stand between the innocent and the zealots who claimed to follow them. I traveled with one of those fleets, though I was no longer young. My body needed support exoskeletons. My lungs adjusted to Earth's thick air through medicine, but I could not stay behind. I had seen their rise. I needed to see how they would defend the very ideals that had birthed this galaxy of believers. The journey was long, marked by silence and thought. The humans aboard were not triumphant. They were solemn, burdened by responsibility. "We didn't ask to lead anyone," one pilot told me as we watched stars drift past the viewport. "We just wanted to prove that living's worth it. Now we have to prove it again." When we reached the forge systems, the sight stole my breath. Entire planets burned. The zealots had enslaved species, forced them into mining and warship construction. They believed suffering was purification, that by enduring agony they honored the Deathworlders. It was the greatest blasphemy of all, using endurance as an excuse for cruelty. Humanity didn't bring vengeance. They brought truth. They broadcast across the sector, their message clear and unflinching. "We are the Deathworlders," Captain Wren's voice rang out. "We don't burn worlds. We rebuild them. We don't demand pain. We share it. Lay down your weapons and remember who we are." Many did. Entire battalions surrendered at the sound of her voice. Some refused. Fanatics too far gone, and battle became unavoidable. It was brutal but short. Humanity's fleets did not revel in destruction. They wept for it. When the smoke cleared, they began tending the wounded, human and enemy alike. They rebuilt hospitals before fortresses, fed the starving before celebrating victory. In the aftermath, I walked among the survivors, aliens of every form imaginable, tended by human medics who moved tirelessly through the crowds. One young soldier, his face streaked with ash, looked at me and said, "I thought they were myths. I thought no one could be this kind." "They aren't myths," I told him softly. "They're just human." And in that word, there was a weight beyond measure. Months later, the Forge War ended, but its scars ran deep. Many of the zealots were imprisoned. Others redeemed through rehabilitation efforts humanity themselves oversaw. Earth sent emissaries to every affected world, not to preach, but to listen. They offered aid, education, and understanding. And slowly, belief healed. Still, something had shifted within humanity. They had seen what their legend could do, how even hope, if misused, could become a weapon. I remember speaking with Captain Wren during one of her final addresses. Her health had begun to fail, the decades of service weighing on her bones, but her eyes burned with that same indomitable light. "We'll fade someday," she told me. "Our names, our stories, they'll become something else, maybe myths again. But that's all right. What matters isn't that they remember us, it's that they remember to keep standing." After her death, the galaxy mourned as if it had lost a star. Memorials appeared everywhere. On worlds she had saved, on ships she had commanded, in hearts she had touched. But humanity refused to deify her. "She was one of us," they said. "That's all the honor she needs." The galaxy listened. Slowly, reverence matured into something gentler. The path of endurance no longer centered solely on humanity, but on the principle humanity had embodied. Every species began contributing their own stories of struggle, their own ways of enduring. What began as worship evolved into unity. And yet, Earth remained its quiet axis, a small, dangerous, vibrant world spinning faithfully beneath its storm-wrapped sky. I often walked its forests, old now and frail, supported by a cane carved from human oak. Once I sat beside a river with a young human poet who asked me, "Do you ever regret what you started?" I thought about it for a long time. "I didn't start it," I said finally. "You did. We just finally noticed." He smiled and looked at the water. "Then I guess we're all part of the same current." I watched the sunlight ripple across the surface, golden and endless, and realized how right he was. Humanity had not conquered the stars through force, but through connection. They had taught us all that strength wasn't measured in victory, but in the willingness to try again after loss. Decades later, when my time finally began to wane, I asked to be buried not in a tomb or a monument, but beneath a human tree. "Let my atoms feed life," I wrote in my will. "That's the closest to eternity any of us should want." And so it was done. But my story didn't end there. I know this because of what came after, long after my passing, long after the last of the original witnesses had turned to dust. Humanity endured, as they always did, but they changed once more. They ventured farther, beyond even the mapped stars, leaving behind colonies that flourished independently. The path of endurance became the foundation of galactic civilization itself. 1,000 years passed, then another. The old empires fell, new ones rose. The word human became legend, then mystery. Some said they had ascended, others that they had vanished into the deep void. Their homeworld was guarded by those who still remembered the open hand, now a symbol of eternal courage. And yet sometimes strange signals were detected in the dark. Ancient transmissions carried by the silence between galaxies. A voice repeating, faint but clear, "Keep going." When scholars traced the origin, they found it came from no known system, perhaps from beyond the galactic rim. Some dismissed it as interference, others as coincidence. But among the faithful, the meaning was clear. The Deathworlders had not vanished. They had simply gone ahead. Even now, entire generations still follow the lesson they left behind. Not in temples, not in songs, but in acts of creation and compassion. They say that every time a dying world rebuilds, every time a lost soul finds the courage to rise again, the Deathworlders smile somewhere in the dark. Perhaps they do. Or perhaps it is only the universe remembering them the way I do, not as gods, but as proof that mortality itself can be sacred. And maybe that's all any of us are meant to do. To endure, to try, to leave behind light for those who come next. The humans taught us that, and for that alone, we will forever whisper their name. The centuries became millennia, and still the name of the Deathworlders was spoken. It had softened over time, reshaped by translation, by myth, by the hands of countless storytellers. To some, they were the first builders, to others the silent ones, or simply those who endured. Their memory lingered like light echoing across deep space, faint but never gone. The galaxy they had once united had fractured into 1,000 nations again, but the foundation they laid, the belief that survival was a sacred act, remained the quiet heartbeat of civilization. I was not there to see it, of course. My body had long since returned to Earth's soil, feeding the roots of a tree that had grown vast and strong. But those who came after me continued the work I began. Generations of scholars, wanderers, and dreamers sought traces of humanity's final journey. The more they searched, the more contradictions they found. There were ruins of human design on worlds humanity had supposedly never reached, temples with carvings of open hands older than their own calendars, and faint signals buried in ancient cosmic radiation that still whispered across eternity. "Keep going," they said, always that same phrase. It was in the year 48,206 by the new galactic calendar that an expedition set out to find the truth. Led by a young historian named Kessir Val, They sought the rim beyond, a region so distant and unstable that even light took centuries to pass through. Kessir had grown up on a world that worshipped humanity not as deities, but as teachers. Her people believed that to walk the path of endurance was to continue humanity's unfinished journey, to face what they had faced and see what they had seen. For her, finding them was not a mission of faith, but of gratitude. Her ship, the Pilgrim's Wake, was small but built on human design principles, durable, adaptable, beautiful in its simplicity. Its crew was a mixture of species, bound by the shared dream of touching the legacy of the Deathworlders. They carried no weapons, only tools and archives. Their journey was long, stretching through uncharted systems, past dead suns and broken worlds. On many of those worlds they found remnants, old domes of carbon fiber lattice, skeletal towers that still reached for the stars, cradles of metal and glass fused by ancient heat. And every ruin bore the same mark somewhere, a hand, open and unarmed. The crew began to feel it, not fear, but reverence. Each artifact seemed alive, humming faintly with a power not of technology, but intention. It was as if humanity had left behind not just machines, but memories encoded in the fabric of space itself. One day, deep in the unlit void between galaxies, the ship detected a signal unlike any before. It pulsed once every 23 hours, faint but consistent. Kessir recognized the cadence at once. It matched the structure of an old Earth distress beacon, but this one carried no coordinates, only a sequence of numbers followed by a word. When decoded, the word was unmistakable: home. The crew followed the trail, diving deeper into darkness. For weeks they navigated gravitational storms and radiation fields, until at last they emerged into a system that defied all records. There was no star, only a single planet suspended in the glow of an artificial light, orbiting a massive energy source of unknown origin. The world was gray and cold, yet covered in shimmering towers that pulsed faintly, like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. When they landed, their sensors failed almost immediately. The atmosphere was breathable, the temperature stable, but the energy readings were off every chart. As Kessir and her team stepped onto the surface, the ground felt warm beneath their feet, humming softly, as if the planet itself recognized them. Then they saw it. At the center of the plain stood a colossal structure, carved from black stone and lined with steel veins that glowed with inner light. It was not a temple, nor a fortress, but something older, a vault. Across its entrance, words were etched in 100 languages, many extinct, yet all translated into one beneath them. We did not ascend. We endured. Inside there was no treasure, no technology beyond understanding. Only walls covered in carvings, scenes of human life through the ages, children laughing in rain, farmers planting seeds, soldiers weeping after war, scientists gazing at stars. Every act, no matter how small, immortalized in perfect relief. And at the end of the corridor stood a single figure, cast in metal, a human kneeling, one hand on the ground, the other reaching forward. Beneath it was a plaque. The words were simple: "To endure is not to win. It is to live when life has no reason left." The crew stood in silence for a long time. Then Kessir knelt and touched the cold metal of the statue's hand. "You're still teaching us," she whispered. In that moment, something stirred. The lights along the walls flared softly, and a faint hum filled the air. A voice, ancient but clear, spoke, not from any single point, but from everywhere at once. "Who are you?" it asked. Kessir swallowed hard. "We are those who followed," she said. "Those who learned from you." There was silence. Then the voice spoke again, softer now. "Then you have already found what you seek." The walls shimmered, and for a brief instant, the room changed. Holograms flickered to life. Humans of every age and color, laughing, working, fighting, living. They looked not like gods, but like people, flawed, scarred, radiant. "We left not to be remembered," the voice said. "We left to see if others would rise. You have. The galaxy lives. You endured. That is enough." Then, just as suddenly, the light faded. The vault grew silent once more. The hum beneath the ground ceased, leaving only stillness. Kassir and her team remained there for hours, recording everything, but the voice never returned. It didn't need to. The message was clear. Humanity was gone. Not dead, but transcended. Not in body, but in legacy. They had scattered their essence into every civilization they had touched, embedding endurance itself into the soul of the galaxy. When the Pilgrim's Wake returned home, its recordings spread like wildfire. The Vault's message unified fractured worlds, rekindling the old ideals. Once again, the open hand became a symbol, not of power, but of peace. The path of endurance evolved once more, now not as worship, but as remembrance. It was no longer about humanity, but about what it meant to be human, to feel, to fail, to rise. And yet, rumors persisted. Travelers in the outer dark spoke of ships of unknown design gliding through black space, rescuing stranded explorers, healing dying colonies, leaving behind food and medicine, but never names. They bore no insignia save a simple mark burned into their hulls, a hand open and shining. Were they ghosts? Survivors? Machines carrying out forgotten duties? No one could say, but those who saw them swore that their captains looked human. Generations passed, and the galaxy changed again. The descendants of those who once worshipped humanity now led worlds of their own. New species arose, each shaped in some way by that first spark. And still, in the darkest hours, when hope faltered and the night seemed endless, people looked up and remembered the ancient words, "Keep going." I like to think humanity still watches us from somewhere out there, not as rulers, but as fellow travelers. Maybe they walk among the stars beyond the rim, building new worlds, teaching new species how to endure. Maybe they became something greater, not beyond flesh, but beyond despair, because that was always their true power. Not strength, not intelligence, not fire or war. It was the refusal to surrender, the relentless belief that life, however fragile, was worth fighting for. And now, that belief belongs to all of us. Sometimes, when a planet recovers after catastrophe, when a child learns to breathe on a newly terraformed world, when strangers help each other across battlefields, people whisper the old name, not as prayer, but as promise. They say, "The Deathworlders taught us to live." And in that quiet vow, across 10,000 stars, the galaxy keeps moving forward, undaunted, unbroken, forever enduring, because that's what they left behind. Not monuments or miracles, but a way to keep walking through the dark. And perhaps somewhere, in the silence between galaxies, a voice still whispers back, "We see you. Keep going." The story of humanity had never been about gods. It was about survival, about standing again and again until even the stars took notice. And so long after their world had turned to legend, their spirit remained the one law the cosmos never forgot. No weapon could erase them. No time could bury them. They had become something greater than myth. They had become the will to live itself.